For the next several weeks, we're going to look at church discipline. Now, before you go off the deep end, some of you are thinking, oh, we're getting ready to excommunicate or disfellowship or withdraw from somebody. No, that's not it at all. It's not it at all. Number one, church discipline is something that's overlooked quite commonly in the church today, but it's something that we need to think about. I mean, it is there and it is to be exercised when the time comes, but there are so many facets to it. We have a tendency to zoom in to one particular piece of it without giving credit that there are lots of other things that surround that, and we want to take a look at some of those things. So, to get started, I want everybody to close your eyes. Close your eyes. Trust me, I'm not going to hit you. Okay. Breathe in. Blow out. Now, I want you to, what's the first thing that you think about when you hear the word discipline? Now get that thought in your head and hang on to it, because we're going to talk about that in just a minute. Okay, you can open your eyes. Was this the first thing you thought about? This woman reminds me of my first grade teacher. Her name was Miss Nelson, and she was pretty stout. She was sort of a no-nonsense person. If you remember Flo from the 1970s comedy Alice, imagine her as a brunette with glasses, and that was her, pretty much. But I remembered her because of discipline. You know, she wasn't one of these that would, leave you out of recess because you colored outside the lines. But as a first grader, it was very intimidating because she didn't hold back. Did you think about this? Or maybe this. I played basketball in high school for 4 years. We went to practice every day. In my freshman year, we couldn't beat ourselves. We were that bad. And I remember my JV coach, after our 8th consecutive loss against Daniel Boone, we go to practice the next day, and the first thing he said was, everybody get on the line. We knew what was coming. And we sat there and ran, well, we didn't sit there, we ran 8 suicides before practice even started. And of course, by the time it was over with, we're out of breath and, trying to figure out what did we do to deserve this. And he was just going off, and he said, I can't believe you guys. He said, we've went over these plays before. You know what you're supposed to do. You didn't rebound. We didn't handle the ball. We didn't make free throws, just on and on and on and on and on. And at one point during this, he said, you're going to pay for this. He said, you're going to remember this day. He said, when you're at your 10-year high school reunion, you're going to remember this day. And guess what we talked about at my 10-year high school reunion? Discipline. Did you think about this? Was this your number one go-to image when you heard discipline? Or maybe something like this. I don't know if anybody in here, practices the art of Tai Chi or some other, karate or judo or something like that, or maybe you're into meditation. But this is also a different side of discipline. Why are there so many possibilities? How many of you thought the first one? Okay, how many of you thought the second one? Or the third one? Okay? Discipline is both a noun and a verb. I could give you a sentence that uses discipline as a noun. I can give it to you as a verb. Discipline has lots of different aspects to it. So let's define what it is. So if we pull out Webster's dictionary, if we look at it in the noun form, control gained by enforcing obedience or order, orderly or prescribed conduct or pattern of behavior, self-control. 2, punishment. 3, training that corrects, molds, or perfects the mental faculties or moral character. 4, a field of study. 5, a rule or system of governing rules, conduct, or activity. And 6, instruction. So if we look at the verb form, transitive verb, to punish or penalize for the sake of enforcing obedience and perfecting moral character, to train or develop by instruction and exercise, especially in self-control, to bring a group under control, for instance, to discipline troops, or to impose order upon. This one and this one have some commonalities between them, because the noun and the verb form actually mean the same thing. So what does discipline mean? Discipline's a word which is particularly out of step with our time. Would you agree? Yes. Ours is a permissive, indulgent age. It's an age emphasizing no controls, no restraints, and no limitations. One of the greatest needs of our day is discipline, and that was a quote from Baxter. This was his primary feeling about discipline, that we have a problem with it today. 40 years ago, we had a problem with it. We have a bigger problem with it today. Discipline in lots of different areas. People doing the things that they should be doing. In the way that we eat, the way that we exercise, the way that we study our Bible. There's lots of things that our discipline needs to improve in. Discipline in the church has been so long neglected that it cries out for obedience. And like I said, the point of this is not because we're getting ready to excommunicate somebody. Not at all. It's only because we need to know the parameters of what church discipline is. And to do that, we need to zoom out a little bit. Not zero in on it, but zoom out and look at the whole concept of discipline and what it is, so that as we look at the actual aspects of church discipline, we have a better expository thought process about what it is. So, Webster, once again, training or experience that corrects, molds, strengthens, or perfects, especially the mental faculties or moral character, primarily in admonishing or calling to soundness of mind or to self-control. It's used in 2 Timothy chapter 1, verse 7, talks about being of sound mind. Discipline means to teach, instruct, correct, or train one that he might be strengthened, perfected, punished, or chastised. It's a treatment suited to disciple, education, learning, training, subject to rule, habit, or obedience. Specifically and negatively, church discipline involves the exclusion of the disorderly from the fellowship of the disciples. And that's a quote from Thomas Warren. Now, do you think, I'll ask this question, there is a lack of discipline all across society today?
Yes.
Would you say that about the military?
Somewhat. Yeah.
Okay. How so?
Well, until recently, they've had people who were not concerned with discipline going in the military, and they're resisting the concept of military discipline. And because of that, they're interfering with the cohesiveness of the unit. And so they had to use discipline in sending those people out of the military.
Okay.
That does happen sometimes.
What other thing that's happened in the military that's really, and this happened several years ago? Yes, Mr. Singleton.
They've had to cut down on the actions that they do. They have the red cards. Like if you're making someone too uncomfortable or whatever, then you hold up this card, and that's supposed to get the drill instructor off of your back, kind of a thing. Versus the old Marine Corps or Army, where they would physically put hands on you to motivate you to do what you needed to do.
What about homosexuality in the military?
That's discipline from the other side of the spectrum. They lost discipline as far as their morality goes. They were no longer bent on following a certain sense of right or wrong. They were encouraged to open up and accept anything and everything.
So at face value, when I think about the military, I think about a bunch of disciplined people. They get up at 5 a.m., they run 5 miles, they shine their boots with a toothbrush, All of these things to me which spell discipline, but even still, there are things in there that lack discipline or could be improved upon. So broadly speaking, it includes all the processes or means which the church trains and educates its members to walk in the light. That's 1 John 1:7. The nature of discipline is twofold. It's instructive or preventive, and it's corrective, chastening, or penalizing in nature. Now, as the church, we meet together every time, and we use instructive or preventive. Somebody teaches a Bible class, Chris gives a sermon, that is discipline in itself. The fact that you're here to learn about that shows a form of discipline. But when we get outside the boundaries of that, well, now we're looking at corrective, chastising, or penalizing type of discipline. If I walk over here and slap Chris upside the head, am I exercising discipline?
Maybe.
I can't top that. In general, we have a tendency to first think of discipline as the resulting action taken after one or more actions yield undesired results. Okay? Think about your kids. Your kids misbehave. You tell them once. You tell them twice. You tell them the third time, and guess what comes after that? Discipline. In one form or another. I know that spanking is frowned upon heavily by society today, but it still works. All right, here's a question for you. Must true discipline be preemptive? Preemptive is a 50-cent word, but do you understand what the question means? Okay, the answer is yes. So historically, God in His infinite wisdom has always applied discipline both preemptively in the noun form and as a means to correct or restore the desired behavior in the verb form. If I come over and I slap Chris upside the head for no reason, that's not discipline. That's just pure meanness. See, if I had told Chris something and I'd given him the instructive discipline and he didn't do it, and then I slap him upside the head, you could say that is discipline. So we have to think about discipline in the right terms. So in the Christian age, the same is still true. So let's look at the scheme of redemption, for instance. So we have the establishment of the New Testament church and its terms and conditions. So here's the preemptive side of it. We have the establishment of the church, we have doctrine, we have worship patterns, we have leadership models, and on the other side, the instructive and corrective, we have establishing and defining the steps for proper behavior and correct behavior through measured actions. And those measured actions are one of many. But in either case, these are given by biblical authority. We don't have the right to set what the standard is, and we don't have a right necessarily to determine what the punishment is. Both of these are biblically directed, and it's important that we understand that, especially when we think about church discipline. Yes, sir.
You think about preemptive, I think it could be safe to say that's what God may have done for Paul with the thorn in the flesh. It says, "Let's not be exalted above measure." It's like we often don't look at suffering that way, but sometimes it could keep us from doing something that would take us away from God. And, sometimes I wonder if I'm going through something, is this to keep me from doing something awful in the future? We don't know, but who does that?
Yeah, we don't know. And feel free to speak up. I mean, this is a class that I would like to have discussion on because this is a topic that affects all of us. Yes, sir.
I think we could say that from the very beginning in the garden, God used preemptive discipline. We warn people. That's our preemptive discipline.
And what was that discipline?
Said don't touch.
Don't eat that tree.
That's right.
Okay, so the discipline was preemptive there. Discipline is a Bible subject. Scholars of most denominational churches agree that discipline occupies a prominent place in God's overall scheme of redemption. But many denominations hold differing degrees of importance about it and applying it and enforcing it. So what I'd like to do is look at a few comments that are here, and these are from denominational people. This is Charles Urban. He was a denominational preacher, and he had strong feelings about it. He said, "It's further evident that the purpose of the church discipline is not only the reformation of the offender and the preservation of moral purity of the church, but in the third place, it is the defense of the good name and fame of the church. Every effort must be made to show the world that the Church of Christ will not tolerate moral evil within its bounds." And the word Church of Christ is not used in the same term that we associate it with, but there's obviously some strong feelings there about discipline being essential. Possibly the time now has come for the church to consider the discipline not only of men guilty of the gross sins with which this section of the epistle especially deals with, but also those who are greedy to gain, guilty of extortion, and abusive in the language. Such action might cause some consternation in our complacent modern church, but it might bring a stirring, surprising, awakening message to an unbelieving world. This is James McKnight. He was a Presbyterian theologian. He said, "The wholesome discipline which Christ instituted in his church at the beginning was rigorously and impartially exercised by the primitive Christians toward their offending brethren, and with the happiest success in preserving purity of manners among themselves. In modern times, however, this salutary discipline has been much neglected in the church," which we've already said. Discipline has really faded off the scale since the establishment. Philip Schaff, another Presbyterian, he said, "These facts show how needful discipline is, both for the church herself and for the offenders. For the church is a process of self-purification and the assertion of the holiness and moral dignity which essentially belongs to her. To the offender, it is at once merited punishment and as a means of repentance and reform. For the ultimate end of the agency of Christ and his church is the salvation of souls." So the stance in the churches of Christ is that discipline is commanded and it is essential to instruct, correct, and here's another one that you don't think of, protect its members and preserve the sanctity of the Lord's church and church doctrine. You know, I stand up in front of you as an elder, and we have 3 other elders, but that's part of our job, is to protect. You know, protect what's coming in to the church. We're looking for false doctrine. We're looking for things because we want to be in dead alignment with what the Scriptures say. So protection is often overlooked. We think that, oh, well, they're out to get us. You know, we're going to be excommunicated. No, actually, discipline is there to help protect other members. It's also, believe it or not, it's actually there to protect you, to keep your soul safe. Now, from the church, people in the church who are affiliated with Church of Christ, this is Thomas Warren. He said, "Churches which fall in this point will fail in their mission of saving souls by holding forth the word of life. Failure to purge out sin leads to a toleration of sin. Toleration of sin leads to a love of sin. Love of sin leads to a practice of sin. And Christ simply won't tolerate this." And we know this. There's several places in the Scriptures where we can find examples of this. But we can't be lazy. We can't get content with, well, that's just kind of the way we are. You know, I've heard people say, well, you'll just have to get over it because that's how I am. Well, if that's who you are and it's wrong, you're still wrong. And if you don't do anything to improve it, guess what? You have no what? You have no discipline. John McGarvey, commenting on discipline administered in Acts 5, 1 through 11, asks, "When shall the rigid discipline which God established in the beginning be seen on earth once more? Let the shepherds of the flock give answer as they remember that they must give an account to God concerning the souls committed to their care." Last week, Mike's class, he talked about elders, and I think he did a great job of boiling it down. You know, we're just as human as anybody else. We make mistakes, we sin, you know, we struggle with things, but we decided to take on the extra work, if you will, trying to preserve the church and trying to watch over the flock to, yes, sir, Eddie.
This is where the eldership really comes into play. You've got a huge task in your hands to teach and to protect, just like a shepherd should. I can remember many years ago, as a young man, approaching an elder where I was born at the time about a person who was involved in some bad stuff. And then they quit coming. And I was concerned about the person, so I went to this elder, and his response was, well, the way we look at it, if they decide they're not going to come back, then they've already withdrawn from us. And that has really stuck with me through the years, because that's an eldership that took a lazy approach to protecting and guiding the flock.
Does everybody remember the parable of the lost sheep? What did the shepherd do? He left them all and went to find the one. And that's really the way that we as elders should be. You know, when you're not here, we're concerned about you. But it's not just our job to do that. You know, as church members, we all have to share that responsibility. When somebody's not here, if the person that normally sits beside you in the pew is not here, it's not a bad idea to call them and say, hey, we missed you at church. Is everything okay? You know, it shows that we care, but it's also a disciplinary aspect. You know, we want to watch out for each other, just as Christ watched out for the church, and he charges us to be aware of the things in our environment. Alexander Campbell wrote, good disciples is as essential to the moral growth, peace, and prosperity of the church of Christ as good doctrine. With it, no society can long subsist. That she, the church, may sustain her moral dignity, she must never display any partiality for evildoers, no leniency for transgressors. She must never pity the sinner so much as to forgive him to the dishonor of her Lord. Those who put her to shame, she must be put to shame before she receives them into the bosom of her sympathy and affection. Pretty strong words. Clinton Hamilton said, no one familiar with the New Testament will say that the subject of withdrawing from a brother is unimportant. Any mature and serious student readily acknowledges that this subject occupies a prominent position in the remedial scheme. You know, unfortunately, we have to have that attitude. You know, we want to protect what's in the church. You know, we want to protect the sanctity of it. But unfortunately, it's measures that we have to take sometimes. Let me ask you a question. If you were to go to the grocery store today and you bought a gallon of milk, and you go home, you open the top, and you peel the little thing back, and you look in the top and there's a dead fly in there, are you going to drink that milk? I wouldn't. But see, that should be our attitude. You know, we want to eliminate all the bad things. We want to be careful. We want to take special care and concern when we look at the church. You know, or do we have brothers and sisters that are struggling? You know, and we should have a certain attitude towards them, and we'll talk about that here in a minute. Guy Woods wrote, notwithstanding the laxity that presently obtains in local congregations, the exercise of discipline of heretics and every other kind of sinful conduct is no obscure teaching, but clearly and pointedly enjoined in the Scriptures. And this is G.C. Brewer. He said, the Lord desires that his church be a pure church without spot, wrinkle, blemish, or any such thing. It is unthinkable that Christ will own his bride if she becomes unchaste, plays the harlot after the world, and has her affections taken away from Christ and set on things thereby becomes a partaker of their sin, and will soon so far drift out of the favor of the Lord that the candlestick will be removed. So you can see from all of these comments people made from denominational realms as well as people affiliated with the church, discipline has been a problem. And you know what? We haven't fixed it. And you know what? It'll never be fixed because we constantly have to be on the lookout for it. We always have to analyze what we're doing. We have to look at what our brothers and sisters are doing. Are they living, scripturally? Is there some way that we can tend to their needs so that we can pull them out of the fire, so to speak? There's a lot of scripture in the Old Testament and New Testament that deal with discipline. You probably know more than that's represented up here. This is Genesis 17:14. And the uncircumcised male child who is not circumcised in the flesh of his foreskin, that person shall be cut off from his people. He has broken my covenant. Now tell me what the discipline is. What's the preemptive discipline?
Circumcision.
Okay? And what's the verb discipline? What's going to happen? Okay, cause and effect. Leviticus 7:27, this is the law talking about fat and blood may not be eaten. Whoever eats any blood, that person shall be cut off from his people. So what's the preemptive discipline here? Don't eat blood, or you'll be cut off. Leviticus 17:8 and 9, this concerns the sanctity of blood. Also you say to them, whatever man of the house of Israel or of the strangers who dwell among you, who offers a burnt offering or sacrifice and does not bring it to the door of the tabernacle of meeting to offer it to the Lord, that man shall be cut off from among his people. Cause and effect, preemptive discipline, and disciplinary action that's taken. Now, in all three of these, what's the disciplinary action? They will be cut off. This is Deuteronomy 13:12 through 18. If you hear someone in one of your cities, which the Lord your God gives you to dwell in, saying, corrupt men have gone out from among you and enticed the inhabitants of their city, saying, let us go and serve other gods, which you have not known, then you shall inquire, search out, and ask diligently. And if it is indeed true and certain that such an abomination was committed among you, you shall surely strike the inhabitants of that city with the edge of the sword, utterly destroying it, all that is in it, and its livestock with the edge of the sword. Pretty stern consequences. You shall gather all of its plunder into the middle of the street and completely burn with fire the city, all of its plunder, for the Lord your God. It shall be a heap forever, it shall not be built again. So none of the accursed things shall remain in your hand, that the Lord may turn from the fierceness of his anger and show you mercy, have compassion on you, and multiply you, just as he swore to your fathers, because you have listened to the voice of the Lord your God, to keep his commandments which I commanded you today, to do what is right in the eyes of the Lord. It's also a subject in the New Testament. It's not just the Old Testament. This is Paul. He says, now I urge you, brethren, note that those who cause divisions and offenses contrary to the doctrine which you have learned, and avoid them. For those who are such do not serve our Lord Jesus Christ, but their own belly, and by smooth words and flattering speech deceive the hearts of the simple. Be on the lookout, be disciplined. 1 Corinthians 4:19-21, but I will come to you shortly if the Lord wills, and I will know, not the word of those who are puffed up, but the power. For the kingdom of God is not in word, but in power. What do you want? Shall I come to you with the rod, or in love and spirit of gentleness? Come to you with the rod, or in love and spirit, disciplined. Let's see, we're running out of time here, so I'm going to skip over this. 1 Corinthians, this is talking about where immorality actually defiles the church. This is also coming from Paul. That one's a long one. These verses, 1 Corinthians 5, 1-13, talk about that immorality will be judged. There is discipline, there is consequence. It's there. 1 Thessalonians 5:14, we exhort you, brethren, warn those who are unruly, comfort the faint-hearted, uphold the weak, be patient with all. See that no one renders evil for evil to anyone, but always pursue what is good for both yourselves and for all. We should be doing this too. We need to be looking out for one another. 2 Thessalonians, similar. 1 Timothy 5:19 and 20, do not receive an accusation against an elder except from 2 or 3 witnesses. Those who are sinning rebuke in the presence of all, that the rest may also fear. We as elders are subject to discipline too. We're not above anybody else in the church as far as the ability to reproach. We are subject to discipline as well. Speak these things, exhort and rebuke with all authority. Let no one despise you. We have authority for discipline, and we're going to talk more about that next week. Church discipline brings about positive and negative influences, if you think about it. Submitting to the discipline of Christ, following the scheme of redemption, putting on Christ in baptism, has positive consequences in that our old sin's washed away. We're part of the church body. Our sin continues to be washed as long as we are living the Christian life. And most importantly, we have the hope of an eternal home in heaven. So this means we are continually adhering to the discipline of Christ, discipline in the noun form. On the flip side of that, not adhering to the discipline has negative consequences, and that one may be subject to punishment or the effects of their sin. If unchanged or unrepentant, ultimately one may be withdrawn from or perhaps disfellowshipped. Such may potentially lead one into apostasy, more importantly, putting at risk the salvation they once had. So not following discipline can bring about the verb form of it. There's several stories in the Bible where discipline was fatally exercised to make the point that discipline is a serious matter. Numbers 15, a man was caught picking up sticks on the Sabbath. What happened to him? Who put him to death? Congregation. Leviticus 10, Nadab and Abihu offered strange fire before the Lord. What happened to them?
God struck him.
Joshua 6:7, Achan took spoils from the city of Jericho. What happened to him?
Him and his family killed him.
Acts 5:1-11, Ananias and Sapphira. What happened to them? So here's people that had discipline enacted upon them fatally. Discipline is a serious matter. It should never be the desire of church members or leadership to have to administer church discipline. It is not the first thing that we want to jump to. We don't take joy in it in our heart. As Christians, we do not and should not rejoice when someone leaves the church or is withdrawn from or disfellowshipped. You know, quite honestly, we really want them here with us. We really want them to be here so that we can try to bring them back onto the path. We have to exercise discipline, but really and truly, we want them to be here. Administering church discipline can be uncomfortable and confrontational. It can affect friendships and relationships. And because of that, and this isn't just in the church, this is denominational wide too, many avoid it for this reason. Well, I like Bob. I know that Bob has a problem, but I really like Bob, and you know, we shouldn't do anything with Bob. I mean, Bob, he's a big contributor. You know, he puts a lot of money in the collection plate. We really just need to back off and let Bob be. Well, unfortunately, it's a necessary means when everything else fails. We shouldn't let the status of anyone get in the way of practicing church discipline. The intent of corrective church discipline is to change undesired or unscriptural behavior for the betterment of that person. It's not to yield our sword, but it's because we want what's best for them. If we're not doing it in that manner, then we're really not exercising discipline the way that it was intended to be exercised. And this is the reason why we present the truth, which includes discipline, by the way, in love. We read about this in Ephesians 4:15, speaking in truth and love, they grow up in all things into him who is the head, Christ. When we have to exercise church discipline or chastise someone, we should be doing it in a loving way. It's not that it's not that, like I said earlier, that we wield the sword and go after them. We really try to do this in a loving way because we want them here with us. My little children, let us not love in word or tongue, but in deed and truth. So we have to show the love even when we have to enact discipline. Once again, scholars, even of denominations, believe that discipline is important, but they hold different degrees of importance in administering its application. So, real quick, let's go over some true and false here. Just yell out the answers. Discipline is completely in step with our time.
False.
False. Discipline in all realms is one of the greatest needs of our time.
True.
Discipline was seldom exercised in the Old Testament. The church has been severely criticized by outsiders for lack of discipline.
Yes.
True.
Discipline is a definite part of God's scheme of redemption. True. Okay. So next week, this has been the 10,000-foot overview, the zoom out, if you will. We'll talk about the authority of discipline next week and start diving into the more serious aspects of it. So thanks for your time and attention.